Hey there, I'm Joshua Johnson. It's good to be with you on this Monday, August 29th, and here's some of what we're talking about tonight. What will investigators do with the documents from Mar-a-Lago? The Justice Department says some of them might need extra reviewing first. We'll explain why and see what that means for the review former President Trump wants. Timing is everything for testimony from Georgia's governor on possible interference in the 2020 election. The latest from Atlanta is just ahead. NASA's long-delayed mission to the moon is delayed a little longer. We'll have the latest from the Kennedy Space Center and look into the future of space exploration. Also, it's back to school time, and that means it's time for active shooter drills. Ken Delanian shows us the business behind these drills in tonight's feature report. And Serena Williams is in the U.S. Open tonight for what she says is her last time. We'll have more on her first-round match and on how tennis could change after she steps away. Well, the Justice Department says it is done with its initial review of the material that was taken from Mar-a-Lago. It's setting aside items that could be covered by attorney-client privilege. This comes from a court filing by the Justice Department today. It reads in part, quote, "The privilege review team identified a limited set of materials that potentially contain attorney-client privileged information and is in the process of following the procedures to address potential privilege disputes, if any." Unquote. We'll break down that legalese in just a second. Now, last week, former President Trump's legal team asked a judge to appoint someone to essentially do the same thing, examine the documents to figure out which ones are privileged. Over the weekend, a federal judge in Florida seemed inclined to make that happen. But now that the Justice Department has indicated it's already kind of done that, is the independent arbiter still necessary? Let's begin tonight with NBC Justice reporter Ryan Riley to break this down a little further. Ryan, can you give us just a little Law School 101? What is attorney-client privilege and how does it factor in here?
So it's essentially the idea that you have the right to have private counsel and speak directly with your attorney and without that information being used against you in an ongoing case. So, if you're guilty of something and you want to talk with your lawyer, for example, they shouldn't be able to intercept those communications and use them against you in court. It's very important for people to be able to have communications with their lawyers that are confidential and privileged. So it's an important element of the legal system here. But I think that in this case, the Justice Department should be able to sort that out fairly easily because it shouldn't be implicating a lot of the actual confidential, or rather the classified documents that Donald Trump had in his possession. Or should it be attorney-client privilege that regards any of these documents necessarily? And that there just shouldn't be communications and attorney communications that are in regard to these classified documents. So it's sort of a very small subset of this overall group of documents that were gathered from Mar-a-Lago, Joshua.
Yeah, you were kind of getting at what my next question is, which is how these two things overlap between what the Justice Department says it's done to try to pull out what looks like a pretty limited amount of documents that deal with attorney-client privilege in its view, and what the former president is asking about, which I'm guessing would be much more expansive. At least that's what his legal team might prefer. How do these two tactics intersect?
So essentially, they want a third party to be doing basically what DOJ has already done here. I think the complicating matter is essentially that what the Trump team is essentially going to be seeking is to broaden this out and make it go beyond just attorney-client privilege documents, which should be a relatively small subset. Because this isn't a case like Rudy Giuliani, who had a special master approved after the Fed seized his cell phones, multiple cell phones, because he was the actual attorney who was dealing with multiple clients. So that was actually a really complicated issue. In this instance, it shouldn't be all that complicated because anyone who he was speaking with, who Trump was speaking with, would have to have an established attorney-client relationship with the former president, and those documents could be set aside. I think essentially what Trump's team is trying to do in their sort of throw spaghetti at the wall legal approach here is they're essentially trying to bring in any potential discussion of executive privilege into this broader set, which is, of course, isn't something that Donald Trump now has the right to assert. That's something that is generally, legal scholars agree, held by the current president rather than by a former president. He can't just exert executive privilege over documents if President Biden, who has in this case waived executive privilege over a number of these documents. So I think that's where the complications could come in. But if this is limited to just a look by a third party at these attorney-client privilege documents, this should be done in relatively short order. You couldn't imagine it would take much longer than it took the FBI and DOJ to do it themselves, Joshua, which was only over a course of about 2 or 3 weeks.
So suppose there are documents that are covered by some kind of attorney-client privilege. And I hear you in terms of this being a rather unique situation because the attorney for a person who is the president is the White House legal counsel, right? The White House legal counsel doesn't represent Donald Trump anymore because his presidential term is over. But suppose that there are documents that end up caught in this and that are considered privileged. What happens to them? Does that mean the FBI can never see them? Does that mean they have to be viewed in the presence of both sets of attorneys? Like, how would the court handle that?
Yeah, they couldn't be used against Trump, which I guess if these documents were used in any sort of January 6th related prosecution could be a complicating factor. But, you know, it's tough to say what we don't know. But the idea that there are classified documents that have some sort of attorney-client privilege on them doesn't really make a ton of sense just on its face, because these weren't matters that were being debated about between the president and his attorney about, you know, decision-making processes. They're sort of in two separate buckets. The problem here is that Donald Trump essentially commingled a lot of different documents all in one and didn't have a very well-organized system going on there. So you have these boxes that the National Archives got with a bunch of, you know, magazine clippings mixed with top secret documents, along with apparently attorney-client privilege documents. So there is a subset of these documents that are attorney-client privilege. It's just going to be tough to figure out how exactly that impacts potential investigation. But, you know, the key here is that if they end up prosecuting this case, it's all about the possession of those classified documents. So I wouldn't think that there's going to be much attorney-client privilege documents that would impact that potential discussion, except for if you talk about the idea that Donald Trump was interfering with an ongoing investigation into his classified documents. But it's hard to imagine that there would be much paper material regarding that would be mixed into this larger pile of documents.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. That's NBC Justice reporter Ryan Riley starting us off tonight. In Georgia, a judge has ruled that Governor Brian Kemp must testify on possible 2020 election interference, possibly by President Trump and others. But that won't happen until after the midterm elections. Governor Kemp is running for a second term. The judge says that by having him testify after the election, that would help prevent it from appearing politicized. NBC's Blaine Alexander has more from Atlanta.
Well, this is another major development in the investigation here in the state of Georgia into the former president and any role that he may have played in allegedly meddling in Georgia's election. We've learned today that a judge has now ruled that Governor Brian Kemp, the Republican governor here in the state of Georgia, must testify under oath before the special grand jury. But here's the thing, it doesn't need to happen right away. In fact, the judge has said that this will be delayed until after the November election. Now, that's an important point because, of course, we are entering really a kind of a crucial time when it comes to this re-election. Of course, Governor Brian Kemp is facing Stacey Abrams in November, a very closely watched rematch for the governor office here in the state of Georgia. And it's something that Kemp's attorneys had argued, essentially saying they didn't want what was happening with this investigation, with the questioning and the possible testimony, to in some way seep into the politics leading up to Election Day. So they said, listen, if you don't quash the subpoena altogether, at least let us delay that testimony until after Election Day. The judge said, you know what, that's reasonable, but said that the Kemp team must immediately, after the election is over, go to the DA's office and set up a time to testify. Now, that's one thing we're watching. The other is that DA Fani Willis actually spoke about this investigation today. She was having a news conference on a different topic, but as you can guess, she was asked about this. She was questioned about this, and she said that time-wise, she's hoping to wrap up this investigation by the end of the year. She says she's about 60% through with all of the people she hopes to hear from, and that she's pleased with the way that this is moving so far and the pace that it's moving. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Blaine. That's NBC's Blaine Alexander with the latest from Atlanta. Let's get into all these stories with NBC News legal analyst and former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance. And Joyce, let's start with this matter of Governor Kemp's testimony and the judge's ruling in the effort to try to keep politics out of this close to a very intense midterm election and an extremely highly watched set of races in Georgia. What do you make of the judge's decision to try to keep some of the politics out of this investigation?
This is a surprising ruling that actually seems to inject politics into the situation. Governor Kemp is not under investigation. He's not a target of Fani Willis's investigation. He's simply a fact witness, and he's one who has successfully avoided testifying for months now. He refused to testify voluntarily. To date, he hasn't complied with the subpoena, so now he comes into court and says, you know, it's late August, it's too close to the election to force me to testify. And in essence, the judge has rewarded him for misbehavior, for his refusal to come forward and testify earlier. Had Kemp been a witness to some sort of other crime, to a car wreck or a bank robbery, I don't think that we would be seeing this level of refusal to testify, which is what really gives one the impression here that Kemp is trying to avoid doing anything that could be politically damaging, and that's not how our criminal justice system works. He should be testifying like any other fact witness in any other grand jury investigation.
How much, if at all, might that perception be permissible for the grand jury to factor in? I imagine that that might make him look suspicious in ways that the court would view askance, and so the judge would just instruct the grand jury to disregard the timing of it and just get down to listening to what he has to say. But how would that factor in?
This issue is unlikely to come up before the grand jury. They're on a fact-finding mission, and Kemp is a fact witness. Willis has said previously that one of the reasons she needs to take his testimony is to help to identify other witnesses who she should speak with before closing out her investigation. So in terms of grand jury and the need to caution them about the testimony, that's very unlikely to come up. Of course, what this points to is that this is one of those hybrid situations where you have someone who's running for political office. They're trying to do anything that could potentially be detrimental to their campaign. Kemp does not want to do anything on the, I'll say, the eve of this election, although we're still a couple of months out. But he does not want to do anything that could set him at odds with the former president. And of course, testifying truthfully might involve testifying that the former president did try to interfere in vote counting in Georgia's election. So this is a hybrid of politics and law that we're seeing today.
Speaking of the former president, I'd love to know what you think about the way that the Mar-a-Lago search and the document fact-finding is being handled so far, including this effort by the Justice Department, as ordered by the court, to rifle through the documents and look for anything that might be privileged. What do you make of that from a legal, strategic perspective in terms of whatever the Justice Department might be looking into and possibly prosecuting?
Well, DOJ is using a process that's been authorized by numerous federal courts of appeals over the years. What they're doing is they're using a filter team. Something that this is not, Joshua. This isn't the search of a lawyer's office. For instance, the search of Rudy Giuliani's office or Michael Cohen's office. They represented Trump. They were searched in connection with their engagement, their friendship with Trump. But the risk in searches of a lawyer's office is that you'll find a lot of documents that are covered by lawyer-client privilege that aren't related to the investigation that you're doing. Rudy Giuliani had a lot of other clients. You don't want to inadvertently sweep their documents up in what's a lawful, probable cause-based search for other reasons. And so in those cases, you'll sometimes see this process involving a special master used. That's a person who's appointed by the judge, and what they do is they take a first cut at everything that's been gathered during the search. They look through it, they screen out anything that could potentially be these sorts of third-party client privilege documents and make sure that those aren't seen improperly by DOJ. But that's not the situation that we have here. To the extent that there's attorney-client privileged material in Trump's residence, it's going to be very limited in scope. Possibly it might still be appropriate for DOJ to see that because of the crime fraud exception to the attorney-client privilege. This is the sort of scenario that's typically dealt with through the use of a filter team. This is a walled-off team of DOJ prosecutors or agents who take, again, this first cut at those documents to make sure that nothing improper goes to the case team. And this is used routinely. Courts, including the 11th Circuit, where this is happening, have said in the past that this is a permissible way to proceed.
And very briefly, before I let you go, it seems like there's going to be a lot of overlapping kinds of filtration of documents. The Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, sent a letter to lawmakers last week saying that her office is also going to convene a group that's going to rifle through the documents they can get their hands on in terms of the potential risks to national security. Sounds like all of these overlapping reviews could get rather complex rather quickly.
I think that's right, and the intelligence community's review, as I read it, is to evaluate the documents and determine what the risk profile for national security looks like. So that will have a very different focus. It only serves to highlight how serious this situation is and the tremendous risks involved by these documents being in a non-secure location like Mar-a-Lago, with so many people wandering in, potentially having access to them. And so it will be important for the intelligence community to stay in their lane and look at the risks to the country as a result.
NBC News legal analyst and University of Alabama law professor Joyce Vance, good to see you. Thank you very much. Still to come, returning to the moon. Today's Artemis 1 mission got scrubbed. We'll tell you why and explain how this fits into a future mission to Mars. Also, Serena Williams says goodbye to pro tennis as she plays in her final U.S. Open. We're glad you're with us for Now Tonight from NBC News. It's been called the most powerful rocket in the world, and it was all set to head to the moon today on the first phase of NASA's Artemis mission. But that will have to wait a few days. One of the rocket's 4 engines was unable to reach the proper temperature. NASA says this is not a cancellation, just a delay. NBC's Jake Ward has more on where the mission goes from here. Hey, Jake.
Joshua, this was going to be a very big day. I mean, first of all, it was going to be a big day for me personally. I've never been to a NASA launch before, and I can't tell you how many people tried to prepare me for what is supposedly an extraordinarily emotional event. I mean, really the feeling of this thing shaking the Earth and then piercing gravity and getting out of here, all of that is supposed to really be quite overwhelming. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see that, but NASA says that the scrubbing of today's launch was a very necessary step, that in fact, everything about this launch was supposed to be a sort of certification process. And because you have a handful of mannequins sitting on board, and because the whole point of this was supposed to test the feasibility of human beings actually surviving a trip around the moon and then coming back into the atmosphere at 25,000 miles an hour, all of that means you have to be extraordinarily careful. You also have to be very careful because of simply the nature of the equipment. I mean, if you think about these engines, the RS-25 engines, and it was one of them that wasn't cooling properly that caused this one to be called off, those engines are monstrous. They're just an absolute, it's like apocalypse in a can. You know, they go from 0 to 17,000 miles an hour in 8.5 seconds. And so you have to be extraordinarily careful. So now the big question is, when can it go again? It can't go between now and Friday because there's a lunar eclipse and the Orion capsule on the top of the spacecraft has to basically use the power of the sun. So Friday is the earliest that could happen, but the big question is whether that thing is going to be fixed out on the launch pad or whether it has to be rolled back to the vehicle assembly building, the enormous building you see behind me. If that's the case, then we could be looking at Friday, we could be looking at Monday, Labor Day, or it might have to get pushed into middle of September, maybe even to October. But I think everybody here would agree that it is probably worth the wait. We didn't want any kind of mishap today, and the goals, the long-term goals here are much, much bigger than a single launch. We're talking here about putting human beings back onto the moon, and that is because the last time we put humans on the moon, they gathered up enough rocks to teach us some really fundamental stuff about our own planet. It's in fact because of the work of those humans, the boots they had on the ground and the rocks they gathered in their arms, that we know the moon is in fact part of the Earth. It was once part of our planet and was cracked off billions of years ago by some sort of thing striking our planet. That's really big science, and it's the kind of thing they hope to do again by landing this time on the south pole of the planet. This is the goal in 2025, when the third of these missions is supposed to go. If that happens, we could suddenly be in a position to not only know more about what made up the Earth, we might even down the line be able to fuel future voyages, perhaps onto Mars, from that water, breaking the hydrogen and oxygen apart to create the fuel that rocket would need. So again, at $93 billion, the cost here is extraordinary, but it may be that, a day of disappointment and that sort of money is perhaps worth it for the long-term goals they're talking about in this Artemis program. Joshua?
Yeah, Jake, nothing will prepare you for seeing a launch for the first time. Promise. Thank you, Jake. That's NBC's Jake Ward reporting from the Kennedy Space Center. Let's get some more context on the Artemis mission from Paul Sutter. He's a professor at Stony Brook University's Institute for Advanced Computational Science and the author of Your Place in the Universe. Professor Sutter, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me on.
So put this delay in some context for us. What do you take from this as someone who I'm sure is eager to see the Artemis mission advance?
Yeah, as much as I would have loved to see that launch go off this morning, absolutely love and delight in rocket launches. It's worth the wait. It's like being on a flight when they announce that there's some mechanical issue and there's a delay. I'd rather be a couple hours late to grandma's house than have the plane blow up in the sky. Better safe than sorry. So I will take a few days in exchange for a successful mission.
Remind us what the Artemis mission is. The way that, and if we could just stay on this graphic for a second, if we could go back to that graphic we just had, if you look at the Artemis logo, that little swoop in terms of the way the A kind of creates a horizon line, it looks like it's pointing at the moon, kind of on its way somewhere else. It's meant, I think, as a step beyond the moon, not just to the moon, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this launch today was Artemis 1, the first launch of a series of missions that have a very long-term, very broad vision of where to take NASA and where to take humanity over the next few decades. So it's not just about returning to the moon for the sake of returning to the moon. It's returning to the moon to develop a sustainable, long-term human presence on the surface of the moon in an orbit around the moon, and to use that as a testing ground to develop the technology necessary to take us to Mars. Mars is so far away. On average, the moon is about 350,000 miles away from the Earth. Mars, on average, is 140 million miles away. And that's going to take a lot of practice and a lot of technology and a lot of development and a lot of very, very smart people working very hard to get us there. And the place where we figure that out is the moon.
With regard to the part of the mission that is on the moon, Dr. Sarah Noble, who's a NASA program scientist, spoke to us yesterday about some of the research that is meant to go on there. Here's part of what she said. Listen.
You know, in Apollo, we went to 6 places, but they were all kind of in the same part of the moon. And now with Artemis, we're going to go and explore an entirely new part of the moon. We're going to go to the South Pole, some of the oldest rocks of the moon. We've got this water and volatiles that we think we can explore there as well. So there's some new stuff.
Professor, is there really that much more that we don't know about the moon? Haven't we been doing moon science for decades now?
Yeah, technically we've been doing moon science for decades, and we do have samples from those old Apollo missions, those half-century old samples that we are still actively studying today. And the Chinese Space Agency has been able to develop rovers that have scooped up samples of moon dust and returned it back to the Earth. But that's tiny. That's bits and pieces. That's just teasing us. There is so much to learn, not just about the moon, but about the entire history of the solar system. I mean, you've seen the moon. It's full of craters. And the reason it's full of craters is it's been bombarded by asteroids and comets billions of years ago. And then it got locked in place. It hasn't changed. There's no erosion. There's no water. There's no plate tectonics on the moon. So when we go to the moon and dig around, we are looking through a window into the state of our solar system as it was billions of years ago. So if we want to understand how planets like our Earth come about, how they form, how life can form on a planet, we don't look here because all that record has been lost. We actually have to look in places like the moon.
Stony Brook professor Paul Sutter, author of Your Place in the Universe. Appreciate you breaking this down for us tonight. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, and I hope it launches soon.
You and me both. I cannot wait to see it. Thank you, Professor. Serena Williams is playing in her final U.S. Open. From the celestial bodies in the moon to a star right here on Earth. She is preparing to step back, as you know, from pro tennis. Williams has a first-round singles match tonight. She'll also play a first-round doubles match with her sister Venus on Wednesday. This month, Serena Williams told Vogue that after the U.S. Open, she will, in her words, evolve away from tennis. That evolution leaves her a superstar with 23 Grand Slam singles titles and 4 Olympic gold medals. NBC's Rahema Ellis is at the U.S. Open in Queens, New York. With more, Rahema, we'll talk about the cultural piece of this in just a second. I'm still not convinced that tennis can exist without Serena Williams in it, but we'll get to that in just a second. Tell us about this match that she is playing tonight and the competitor she's facing, Danka Kovinic. What's her path through the U.S. Open look like this year?
It's a difficult one. She's ranked 80th in the ranking. She's number 80. Danka Kovinic is a 27-year-old woman and playing against a 40-year-old champion. And the last time that Serena won her 23rd Grand Slam, it was in 2017 at the Australian Open. She was 2 months pregnant, and she laid it all on the court, and she won that 23rd Grand Slam. This is a woman who is a fighter from start to finish. And what Kovinic tweeted out when she found out that she was going to be playing Serena, she said something about what a great tribute, and she's looking forward to it. And I think any player worth their salt would say that, no matter what happens here. This is going to be a great match. It's a great opportunity for this young player. And remember, once upon a time, Serena was one of those young players, and she had to knock a champion off of their throne in order for her to make that journey that she's made all these past 2 decades, Joshua. So it's anybody's guess what's going to happen tonight.
Indeed it is, and if she does make it through this first round, her second-round competitor is Annette Kontaveit, who is ranked 2nd in the world right now. So it definitely gets significantly tougher should she make it through this round. Talk about just what the mood is like out at Flushing right now. There are other storylines at the U.S. Open this year, granted, between Novak Djokovic not being there because he's not vaccinated against COVID. Same thing with the Australian Open. Rafael Nadal competing with a torn ab muscle. But I imagine Serena is the only thing on people's lips tonight.
She's the thing on most people's lips and on their minds. Those who came here, people came from far up north, from Maine, and other people we spoke to came from Maryland and North Carolina, South Carolina, for this event tonight. They want to be able to see Serena. She is the talk of this tennis tournament. How many times would you get to see someone of her caliber? We're talking about tennis royalty here. If you had an opportunity to see Jackie Robinson play his last baseball game, would you go? I think you would. And so she ranks up in that caliber of champions. She is an icon, someone now we call by her first name only. It's like the Tiger, it's the Jordan, and the Babe, for example. Now, of course, there's Serena.
I'm glad you mentioned Jackie Robinson, because I feel like when Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, there was baseball before Jackie Robinson and there was baseball after, right? Serena and I are about the same age. So I remember growing up looking at Serena Williams, this little black girl who was about my age, skinny little black boy batting around, tennis balls at the local court, and changing the way that we looked at the game. You spoke to the tournament's director, Stacey Hollister, about that continually changing outlook. And here's part of what she said. Watch.
We look at the mosaic of tennis. It's still white, but it's a lot more black and brown than it was when Serena and Venus started their journey. And we still have a lot more work to do to break down those racial barriers, those financial barriers, for those that don't have the resources to play this great sport. And I believe Serena and Venus's legacy has only begun.
Rahima, can you talk more about what the evolution of that is going to look like, whether it's the U.S. Open's efforts, pro tennis? You know, how does the sport continue to evolve and diversify after Serena Williams steps away from it?
I think the point of it is, if you can see it, you can be it. And that's what both of these women have brought to this game. Not only just in the visual, but the way that they played the game, the caliber and the level of their talent is extraordinary. Nobody's matched it. That's going to continue even after they leave center court.
Now, Serena is known for always turning it when she shows up on the court. She always comes with a power look. She always comes making a presence on the court. What do we expect tonight and going forward in terms of the way that she's going to just present herself on her way out from the U.S. Open?
There's going to be glitter and there's going to be glamour. And there's going to be things that people are going to be talking about later tonight and tomorrow morning. The outfit. You know, she was famous for wearing a tutu at one point on the tennis court. She also wore a cat suit on the tennis court. And people talked about that. But at the end of the day, what people were talking about was her game and how she presented herself on this court. And that's the thing that silences all the talk about the outfit. But she is a performer. She's an entertainer. So we can expect all of those things from the way she looks, the way she sounds, and the way she plays.
Indeed. Thank you, Rahima. That's NBC's Rahima Ellis reporting for us from Queens, New York at the U.S. Open. We'll get to some of today's other top stories in a moment, including severe flooding. One deadly storm in Pakistan is displacing millions of people, while another deluge prompted a state of emergency in Mississippi's capital city. Tonight's headlines begin with flooding in the U.S. and abroad. Let's begin in Pakistan. Deadly flooding there has displaced millions of people and killed more than 1,000. It's a result of this season's record-breaking monsoons. Homes and critical infrastructure are destroyed, and some districts are entirely submerged. Pakistani authorities say the rainfall has been nearly triple the national average, but they're expecting even more rain, and officials are asking the world for help. From our partners at Sky News, international correspondent Alex Rossi has more.
This is what a warming planet looks like in reality. Pakistan on the front line of the climate disaster. The flooding here is on an epic scale, with streets turned into rivers and entire districts submerged by the unending cycle of monsoon rains.
Our helicopters are having trouble finding dry land in the south, in Balochistan, for instance, as to where to drop goods. There are many harrowing and heartbreaking scenes of trauma and distress. This is a huge humanitarian disaster, and I would call it quite apocalyptic.
The country's scientists say there's been a massive change in the intensity of the rainy season, with double the amount of water falling in the last 8 weeks. With rivers swollen and bursting their banks, melting glaciers are also worsening a catastrophe that's killed more than 1,000 people. Many millions have been displaced. They're now living in makeshift camps with basic provisions in short supply.
People are the deprived house are living in the very bad conditions, facing very troublesome conditions, such as they are nowadays living in open areas.
In some places, the waters are slowly receding, but what's left is heartbreaking. The damage is overwhelming in many areas. Rehan Ali and his family are trying to salvage what they can. Like countless others in this worsening environmental disaster, he doesn't know how he will cope.
I don't know how to rebuild my destroyed house. Even I don't have anything to feed my family. I lost everything. I don't know where to go. God help me.
It is staggering, almost beyond comprehension, that nearly a third of Pakistan is now underwater. That's an area the size of Britain. And the monsoon isn't over yet, with more rain forecast. The authorities are appealing for more international assistance, as the first aid has started arriving in the country. But for many trapped by the rising floodwater, it may already be too late. Alex Rossi, Sky News.
Here in the U.S., Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves is finishing up an emergency press conference on the water crisis in the state's capital, Jackson. It's the result of record rainfall and intense flooding of the Pearl River.
As we speak, we are drafting a state of emergency declaration with regards to Jackson's failure to produce running water. The State Health Department has also prepared an emergency order.
Jackson's mayor has also declared an emergency, and the city is distributing drinking water to residents. The Pearl River flows through Jackson. It has a history of flooding, including 17 years ago today, when Hurricane Katrina made landfall in the state. Fortunately, the folks in Mississippi are not seeing hurricane conditions this time around, but they will need some time before things get back to normal. NBC's Guad Venegas has more.
City officials in Jackson, Mississippi are optimistic after a day with improved weather conditions after we saw those flash floods last week, bad weather over the weekend, the state of emergency that was declared by the governor, expecting the Pearl River to flood some of these communities. Now, fortunately, the crest of that flooding did not reach the levels many expected. We were thinking it could get to 35.5 or 36 feet, which are the levels that we saw in 2020. That's when the water did reach some of these communities in Jackson. Fortunately, it was just a few inches below, which meant that the water did get very close to some of these people, very close to their front doors, but not inside the houses, which is good news. So now officials are telling residents that the water will be returning to lower levels at a very slow pace. So they are telling the residents to wait for the water to go back to those levels. There is still some flooding, a lot of the water coming from a reservoir on the northeast side of town, but the water again did not reach those 35.5 or 36 feet that we thought could eventually mean that the flooding would enter some of these homes in Jackson, Mississippi. It has not rained today. The weather forecast indicates it probably will not rain tomorrow. All good news for the residents as city officials here continue dealing with a different water problem. This is with the water service for many of the residents here. Some don't have water service at all, others with no water pressure, and a boil water notice still in effect for the residents here in Jackson, Mississippi, with this flooding improving, conditions getting much better as the river goes back to its normal levels. Everyone here hoping that the rain won't return. Back to you.
Thank you, Guad. That's NBC's Guad Venegas reporting from Jackson, Mississippi. President Biden has something to say about the continued battle for the soul of the nation. That is how the White House is describing a prime-time speech that he plans to make this Thursday. An official says the president will address how America's rights and freedoms are, in his view, under attack heading into the midterms. The backdrop for his speech is fitting. Independence Hall in Philadelphia. That is where the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution were both signed. No word on what time the president will speak, but stay with NBC News Now for coverage of the address. Kentucky has also been dealing with deadly flooding, but kids there are back at school now. You'll hear from some of them when we come back. In Kentucky, there is more hope for rebuilding after major flooding there. One county started school today. Flash floods hit there a few weeks ago. The kids talked about what it's like getting back to class with NBC's Zincle Esamoah. Hey, Zincle.
Hey, Joshua. Well, I'm here at Breathitt County High School, which had its first day of school today. It was supposed to happen a few weeks ago, but because of those devastating floods, there was a major delay. So as we know, at least 39 people lost their lives in that flooding. The Kentucky Department of Education says among the fatalities were students as well as staff members. So as we talk about this today, the energy of the students and the staff and the parents was a bit of an exhale to return to routine and normalcy, but also hesitation because a lot of the devastation is still very much present. I want to give you a sense of what the flooding was like right here at the school. If we just look to my left, you'll see the parking lot. Right now, you can see cement, you can see cars. It looks normal. But if we take a look at this image, just days, weeks ago, this entire area was absolutely covered in water. And Joshua, it's not just the parking lot. The water actually made its way all the way into the school, starting at these steps right here. August 29th, this is what they look like. But if you take a look at that image on your screen, the water reached the second level of these steps. Now, while Breathitt County High School was able to resume classes today, for other counties in the state, that is not the case. There was so much damage that those schools are not anticipated to begin until Labor Day or the end of September. But it's important to note that beyond the physical damage, many of the students and the teachers I spoke with talked about the psychological toll as well.
This is where we all made friends. We've all decided what we wanted to do, how we wanted to go on with our lives, and then all of a sudden everything we've ever done here has just been destroyed.
My biggest concern is the anxiety and the PTSD and the stress that they're going to feel when they come back to school.
I've not seen anything like what we've seen during this flood. It was from east to west, and it impacted almost everybody's life somehow, whether it was a family member or a friend, loved one. It impacted a whole lot of lives because it did a lot of devastation as it went through.
But even through that difficulty that so many students and guidance counselors and teachers described, they also described resiliency in community, many people stepping up to support one another. Teachers told us that they called every single student, and if they couldn't reach someone, they would go to their house and knock on the door. So there's a lot of work that continues to be done, but the community rallies together. In terms of next steps, Kentucky's Governor Andy Beshear signed a bill that would give $212.7 million at least in aid to the state, specifically in regard to flooding, and $40 million of that is expected to go to education efforts. So while it will be a long road to recovery, Joshua, there is a bit of hope. Back to you.
Thank you, Zincle. That's NBC's Zincle Esamwa reporting from Kentucky. You know, it's not just there that kids are going back to school. Kids across the country are, and many of them will be part of active shooter drills. But some of the protocols in these trainings might be out of date. We'll take a closer look in tonight's feature report before we go. Kids are heading back to school across the country. But the increase in gun violence on campuses has more districts holding active shooter trainings for teachers and students. NBC's Ken Delanian has more on that. Hey, Ken.
Joshua, most schools run some sort of active shooter drills. But after May's massacre of fourth graders and their teachers at an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas, some experts worry that many schools are not offering the right training. They want students and teachers to be given options beyond simply hiding in classrooms. And they say active shooter protocols should be as ingrained as fire drills. Here's more. This is how some school officials are preparing for a day they hope will never come. School shootings have become a fixture of American society. A federal database counts 603 incidents of gun violence on campus from 2018 through 2021, 155 so far this year. In response, most schools have implemented so-called active shooter drills. But after a lone gunman took 21 lives in May at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas,
get under the table and act like you're asleep.
Some experts have raised the question, are kids and teachers being taught the wrong lessons?
It's clear that the children in that school were pretty much taught lockdown. And I very much wish that we would begin as a society to accept that we can trust that our children know how to run, because children who have run from school shootings have survived.
Catherine Schweit ran the FBI's active shooter program, which endorses a more proactive response to a school shooter, shorthanded as run, hide, fight. NBC News got access to one version of that style of training, a program known as ALICE, offered by a private company, Navigate 360. After Uvalde, the Phoenix Suns charity paid to train a group of Phoenix teachers who could then train other teachers and students.
Everybody remembers learning to stop, drop, and roll. ALICE training wants alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate to become just as ingrained.
When's the last time a kid died in a school fire in the United States of America? Firefighters don't answer that question. 58, December 1st, 1958, right? So what have we done? We trained kids and teachers what to do when the fire alarm goes off, when they smell smoke, when they see fire.
Brandon Rohn, a former police officer, led the training.
ALICE is very simple in concept, ladies and gentlemen. It really comes down to two foundational principles. Remove yourself from the dangerous location or render that location no longer dangerous.
One educator has chosen to play the shooter, told to enter the classroom with a Nerf gun.
I know I'm not going to die today, but it felt like I was in a real situation, and so it's just so cool to actually practice this with a fake gun, and it really just puts it all into perspective.
ALICE also teaches educators how to counter a shooter, which can mean anything from yelling to throwing a stapler.
Counter is not fighting. Counter is a physiological, psychological interruption of thought, because we would never advocate an unarmed person fight an armed person. What does counter look like? Counter is two techniques: distraction and control.
And Brandon, do you worry at all that by teaching counter, even though you say it's not about fighting back, it's going to encourage people to put themselves in harm's way and actually get somebody killed?
I don't, and the reason why I don't is because we teach the science behind the counter and how we're able to use things like noise, movement, distance, and distraction to overload one's ability to process information, and basically you are causing that physiological, psychological interruption of thought.
Some critics say ALICE training is the wrong approach. Mike Dorn is the executive director of Safe Haven International, a nonprofit focused on school safety.
None of them are tested with all hazard scenarios, because if you just test like ALICE, they test only with active shooter scenarios. Active shooter deaths are one of the rarest types of homicide on school campuses. They account for about 8% of fatalities. So what you end up doing with these type programs, when you focus on active shooter, you condition people, again, that anybody with a gun must be an active shooter.
Navigate 360 officials reject those criticisms.
And do you believe that this training actually would minimize or reduce injuries and fatalities?
I 100% believe that. In fact, we have seen that in several events in K-12 space across the country, where trained students and faculty and staff deployed the training in a time of need and was able to increase their survivability.
They point to an incident last year when 4 students were killed in a shooting at Oxford High School in Oakland County, Michigan. Another 8 were injured. Oakland County Sheriff Mike Bouchard credits ALICE training with preventing more casualties.
Our liaison taught them in ALICE. Those practices were used and they saved lives.
One of the challenges when it comes to the concept of dealing with a violent offender is that you'll freeze. And if you empower people to think through what they could do or what they might do and what they may have to confront, they will be more inclined to skip the freeze part and move to the action part. And that's what all of this training teaches civilians.
Do you feel empowered? I mean, it must be pretty helpless as a teacher when you see something like Uvalde and you're just like, what happens if that occurs in our school? Do you feel better about the situation now?
Oh, yes. I definitely feel better, like a little bit more prepared than just having the kids turn the lights off, lock the door, and go in a corner.
Having gone through all of them, it really just equips you with the strategies and the tools to know what you can do, and has a ton of resources to access in the event of an emergency. And so coming out of today, I feel like way more prepared, even if it was just a one-day training, to go back to my school and kind of give them some of these resources, and then even just for myself if an emergency arises.
Joshua, former FBI official Catherine Schweit told us she fears that most school districts are still using an outdated form of active shooter protocol that instructs students to hunker down under all circumstances. That's sometimes the right thing to do, she and other experts say, but there are other times when the best way to survive is to try to escape the gunman, and in the most dire circumstances, to try to counter the shooter. Joshua?
Thank you, Ken. That's NBC's Ken Delaney reporting. We would love your thoughts on this or anything we covered tonight. We're at NBC Now Tonight on social media. Call us at 888-575-2NBC or email us nowtonight@nbcnews.com. I'm Joshua Johnson. Thanks for making time for us. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.